Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about our archetype that doesn't exist that I think maybe could exist in the future. So today we're going to be talking about pretty much literal Yugi-Boomer archetype. So just imagine the archetype where there's just card arts where they're literally Yugi-Boomers on them, right? So simple question, what would these cards do? So I don't know, like something that looks like this maybe. Yeah, this feels no wait, not this card. You know, some of these cards, you know, but like as a modern day archetype, you know. So what playstyle of Yu-Gi-Oh do we have when it comes to like kind of old gameplay? I think what's pretty iconic for me is like T set or just like setting two cards and just passing. So is there a way we could kind of implement that into an archetype and kind of work it into an archetype maybe? What else do we have? Anything else? Well, I think what is really notable about like probably if we focus around GOAT, then in that format you're mostly playing like full-on board wipes that are fairly sacky. So we don't need necessarily a consistent deck. So we could actually do something kind of neat. So I'm thinking maybe we have something like an effect that says you're allowed to use this archetype's cards from hand, like maybe kind of like Runic. So I'm thinking like a fountain-like effect where you're able to use an archetypal card kind of from hand, or maybe you even get to set it on the field and you can activate it whenever. But the catch with this is because we do want it to be kind of playable in Modern. So I'm thinking something along the lines of you are going to reveal a few cards, and your opponent's going to randomly pick one and they won't know what is picked. And I'm assuming for this archetype, what we would do is we would have like an archetypal kind of like Raigeki, Torrential Tribute, Mirror Force, maybe Book of Moon, Swords of Revealing Light, you know, that type of stuff, just like kind of retrains of old cards. And I'm thinking that you should be able to activate them on the turn that they're set, regardless of which card gets chosen. So like if it were a Raigeki, I should just be able to quick play drop this Raigeki on my opponent's turn. Whenever I want, I guess, or drop a Torrential, or if it's a Mirror Force, I'm thinking that if it were Mirror Force in particular, that there might be something that needs to be done to kind of buff it a little bit, because if your opponent just removes it, I guess. Actually, wait, there is one good way to go about this. If we have like, I think King Sark had like a kind of solution for this, or not King Sark, wrong Sark. The other one, what was it? Shining Sark, right? Skull Shark, Shining Sark, King Sark, so many Sarks. Okay, so Dark Magic Mirror Force actually has a pretty solid effect here. That says, let's see. When an opponent's monster declares an attack or an opponent's monster effect is activated that would destroy a monsters on the field, while a monster that mentions Shining Sarcophagus is on the field, destroys as many attack position monsters your opponent controls as possible. So I think keeping this kind of effect would be like solid, but I'm thinking that for this like Mirror Force retrain, we just make it so that if this is removed by specifically your opponent's card effect, or maybe if you're feeling extra generous, if it's removed by any card effect, it just triggers immediately and does like a Mirror Force like effect where it destroys all of your opponent's attack position monsters. You know? So you can still play around it in theory by summoning in defense position if you really care. So yeah, I think that'd probably be solid. And we're reusing some iconic monsters here. I think that'd be neat. would it be worth retraining some iconic monsters for this? I mean, there's like Jinzo, but Jinzo is honestly just insanely toxic to an extent. This is just kind of a floodgate effect. It's like, eh. Hmm. If we're going to retrain cards, I guess it'd be kind of Shining Sark style, where we're using like card arts from like kind of existing cards like Dark Magician and such. But I don't know. How would Dark Magician fit into this archetype really? I don't think it would super fit, would it? Hmm. I guess if you just threw in like OG Dark Magician as a card, it wouldn't be that problematic. You wouldn't need to retrain Dark Magician at all. In fact, we could just make it so well, we could do it this way where you're allowed to special summon a specific Dark Magician, maybe. Like, I'm thinking maybe you can just cheat out Dark Magician the Dragon Knight to make the deck a little bit better. Probably be fine. Specifically, the Dragon Knight has like back row protection effects and does not do much else. Maybe if it counts as being properly summoned by this. I mean, if the condition is rough enough that it doesn't super impact like Dark Magician, I think it'd be kind of fine. The main idea for summoning this guy though is just to have some body, you know, because you need some bodies to actually be able to, you know, lethal your opponent. The deck would have to play somewhat slow though as well. So, how about this effect though? Yeah, I think this would work moderately okay. So as a condition for activating some of your archetypal cards, like, I don't know, maybe it's tied to your boss monster, maybe it's tied to your starter card. I'm thinking there could be a effect like, you must, during the end phase, if you control more than one monster or more than one spell trap, like, we're counting both separately here. I wouldn't know how you would phrase this in PSCT exactly, but if you do control more than one, you send that card to the graveyard. Because just only being able to set once per turn and only summon one monster, I think, is kind of dumb. So how about instead at the end phase, you just send everything so you only control one card apiece. So you effectively have to end on more or less a T set, which I think is pretty cool. And maybe if you really want to, you could also tie some triggers. I don't think that this would be that interesting per se, but you would tie some triggers to cards being sent to the graveyard this way. But I don't think that'd be that great. Maybe just having some moderate graveyard effects with the archetypal cards would be like fine, right? Just kind of forcing your opponent to also play kind of Yugi-Boomer-esque Yu-Gi-Oh! I think is interesting. How would the retrained cards work, actually, though? Because you don't want them to be completely splashable either. So maybe I'm thinking... Well, I mean, the easiest way I can think of to do this is to have an extra deck monster that changes how the game is played. I'm thinking. So maybe there's like some super easy to summon extra deck monster that has like some insane downside to it, where if you're playing this archetype, you won't really be able to do much else. I mean, I'm thinking of stuff along the lines of like banishing an absurd amount of your extra deck cards face down. Like maybe you banish 13 cards from your extra deck face down or something insane. Or maybe you can special summon this card from your extra deck for like some sort of cost method. Like maybe you have to banish a card from your deck, banish certain cards from the graveyard, whatever. Something relatively easy, I guess. And then it needs like an insane lock that prevents you from playing cards from like other archetypes. And by cards, I don't mean like generic cards. Mostly I'm thinking like locking you out of the extra deck. for the rest of the duel or next 2 turns with like a branded fusion-esque restriction, preventing it for at least like 1 turn or 2 turns or something like that. Like, yeah, something along those lines. Something kind of insane like that. Could we do something as well? I suppose the archetypal thing as well, where you're only allowed to control one thing. If that's tied to like their boss monster, I think that'd be kind of cool, forcing your opponent to effectively also T-set. If they can't go that far, they can't just spam out back row. I mean, they're allowed one back row. Also, in terms of like monsters, they're allowed to end on like whatever monster. They're not being floodgated necessarily. It just like weakens what they're allowed to have as their end board, I suppose. That doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a boss monster though. I guess you could tie that effect to a field spell or something else, like a continuous effect, like not necessarily a continuous spell, but like continuous effect that just applies for the rest of the duel or something. Like as a restriction, I think that'd be kind of cool. But I guess it couldn't be a field spell or back row because you're only allowed to T-set, right? So yeah, I think maybe field spell works actually, but continuous spell, no. I'm thinking you're only allowed to control one spell trap in your back row. Maybe we could we could permit like a field spell or whatever. But being too easy to remove, I think, is kind of like, eh. And the effect itself isn't that insanely oppressive. You're still able to special summon whatever you want. You can activate all the spell traps you want. It's just that specifically during the end phase, you're only allowed to pass on one back row and one monster in your main monster zone. I think that's kind of fair if both flares are under these conditions. I mean, normally it sounds very awful because like you could like if you restrict yourself in regards to monsters, you're still free to use whatever spell traps you want, so you just build your like deck more spell trap heavy, but you're not able to really do this, I don't think, in theory. An archetype that would work like this in theory, so I think that'd be okay. What kind of cards would be solid to give a nod to? Like, they don't need to be direct retrains. If they just function similar, if they function similar, that would be pretty cool as well. Like, we could utilize technically, if we want to, maybe regular polymerization in that deck. I think that'd be possible. Yeah, that'd be okay, I guess. What else? Regular polymerization. Pot of greed. Oh, pot of greed. Just having a pot of greed esque effect in Archetype, I think that'd be pretty cool. So in this case, it would need to be a pot of greed that required you to like probably control the boss monster to do the draw. I think that's probably all right, considering how the archetype would work in theory. Graceful charity. We could have that in archetype as well. In theory, maybe. I don't think I'm a big fan of hand traps here. So probably throw a restriction involving hand traps, or you give this archetype kind of archetypal kind of hand traps that do maybe something. Maybe Freebo retrain or something. That'd be kind of wild. Gores, honest. I don't know exactly like what era of Yu-Gi-Oh you'd be focusing retrains on, but those cards I think worth thinking about. What else do we have? Spirit Reaper, Marshmallow, Sangan. Sangan, Tomato. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do with these cards. In theory, like in terms of retrains as well, to make them more playable. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to know what you guys think as well, and I'm pretty fresh. I have ideas for this at the moment, so yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.